Let's take a quick look at the ignition coils here on the Mini. Now, because the turbocharger's here, you get a lot of heat coming back, and you might say, I see no coils. They're under this plastic cover, so I just pull this plastic cover up, try to pop it off here. There we go, and there are my coils. So this is the side of the engine that has the timing chain. The side of the engine that has the timing chain or timing belt, the cylinder closest to that on an inline engine is always cylinder 1. So that's cylinder 1, cylinder 2, cylinder 3, cylinder 4. The other thing you'll notice is there's nothing holding these coils down. There's a connector that if I pop that clip up, I can just pull these out. But I have some out already over on the bench. All right, another tool, spark gap tester. You'll see again that the tip is adjustable. I can have it out there at 20,000 volts. I can have it over here at 40,000 volts. Generally speaking, you're going to want to see a nice blue, kind of purpley spark. A nice spark, 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 spark. Okay. If I wanted to check this ignition coil, I would ground this end to something metallic in the engine. I'd have this plugged in, and I would take my spark tester and I'd plug it into the bottom of the ignition coil. And while this was grounded, I have somebody crank the engine and I'd look to see if there was a spark there. If I saw a nice blue spark, hey, I'm a winner. If I don't see a blue spark, then this coil is either defective or I'm not getting a signal sent to the coil to have it fire. If this coil didn't fire, what I would do is I would take another ignition coil, switch them, and then see if the misfire moved from this one to this one. If the misfire moves with the coil, then I know the problem is the coil. If the misfire does not move, then I know the problem is something else. Maybe it's a spark plug, maybe it's something else in the cylinder, maybe it's a fuel injector. Right, so this is not a great example, but I have the ignition tester hooked up to my Jacobs ladder. Now the Jacobs ladder puts out about, I don't know, 40,000 volts, 20,000 volts, something around there. When I plug it in, I should get a nice, like, intermittent spark. I would see that nice spark every time that cylinder fired. And it would look like that. It might not go bzzz, it would be more of a short clapping sound. But that's exactly what it should look like if I was getting a spark from that ignition coil. These were taken out of a Toyota Highlander, and you can see that the electrode tip here on these is kind of a nice brown. This one's sort of light, and then this one's sort of a mix between the two. This engine was a V6, cylinders 1, 2, and 3, had no problems, but 4, 5, and 6, these two were misfiring, and they were misfiring because whoever last did the tune-up didn't attach the coil securely, but we'll get to that in a minute. These are Iridium spark plugs. They're very long life. There's the code there at the top. The porcelain here, if you see any cracks or nicks or damage, that's a no-go. That means that it's broken and you need a new plug. This is very soft. Well, let me rephrase that. It's very fragile material. It'll shatter. It'll break like glass. This is the electrode end where the spark actually happens. This is the ground side. This is the power side. Now, these plugs are Iridium. They normally come pre-gapped, but if we had to gap them, you would check them using a gapping tool. Normally, you can check the gap using one of these tools. They make this tool also, it looks like a round coin. I kind of prefer this style just because it's a sliding scale. What we're looking at here is thousandths of an inch, and on this side we're looking at millimeters. So if I wanted to check the gap of this plug, which it's Iridium, and I really have to be careful when I do this, I'm not going to jam the tool in here. I'm going to put it on the sliding ramp and just slide it up until it stops. And right there, about 50 thousandths of an inch is what the gap is. Now that gap is a little wide for this plug. It was supposed to be around, I think the manufacturer said it was supposed to be down here around 40. So these plugs were worn, okay? They have the correct reach, the correct heat range, and if we needed to adjust the plug, if it was not correct, what we do is we use the end of the tool here, and we put it in like that, and we just gently bend the electrode back, just a hair, right? So it's 50 thousandths before, now it's 55 thousandths, and I just moved it 5 thousandths of an inch. So a little bit of movement on these goes a long way. The other thing is, if these plugs are made of platinum, we're not really going to gap them with this tool. And the reason why is because the platinum is actually a soft enough of a metal that if the plugs have been run before, I'm going to wear off that platinum with this, okay? In terms of chemicals, when we do a spark plug change, you have anti-seize and dielectric tune-up grease. They're not the same thing, don't get them confused. The anti-seize compound would sometimes go on the threads of the spark plug. However, we only do that if we're screwing this into a cast iron cylinder head. Aluminum cylinder heads get no anti-seize compound, and the reason why is because this shiny coating on here prevents the plug from corroding and sticking to the aluminum. The other reason is if I use anti-seize compound, this acts as a lubricant, which when I go to use my torque wrench to put the plug back in, I'm going to wind up stripping the threads out of the aluminum cylinder head. So do not put anti-seize compound on the threads for spark plugs if it's going into an aluminum cylinder head, period. The dielectric grease, this stuff, this is a silicone grease. Whoops, I kicked my camera there. The silicone grease, you're going to take a very small amount of this, a super small amount, and you're going to put it on the inside of the coil pack. Now, you're not going to put it here on the low voltage side. You're going to put it down here on the electrode end, okay? And I'm just literally going to take just a little bit of this. And this is something that some manufacturers say you do, and other manufacturers say you don't. I'm going to take just a drop, just like that. I'm going to swirl that around the inside. Now, why would I want to do that? Well, it's got two reasons. One is spark plugs like to stick. And if I put on this dielectric compound on here, it prevents them from sticking. The other thing is that it acts as a sealant, okay? It's actually airtight. Look at that. It's pushing the plug back out. It's so tight. It's going to make sure that if I do get moisture down the spark plug well, I don't have a problem. Okay, so that's spark plugs. Oh, let's talk about spark plug sockets. Spark plug sockets can come in different sizes. Now, you might look at this and go, Mr. Reed, that's a regular socket, but it's not. If you notice, the back side of it has flats. Those flats are designed so you could use a wrench if you had to, in case the clearance is not big enough for your socket. The other thing is that the plug itself is held in by a rubber grip on the inside. The danger is if I use a regular socket that did not have that rubber grip, is the socket could drop this could hit the ground and it would damage the electrode end. The rubber on the inside of the socket acts as a grip. It makes it so it doesn't come out. Now this one is a really, really nice one, made by Durlast. All right. On the inside of this, it's got a nice rubber retainer that snaps nicely onto the socket to hold it in place. Some of the cheaper ones, they get stuck and they're really hard to take off. There's also a larger size for bigger spark plugs. Obviously, it's too big for that. And then there's a small size for very small spark plugs. Obviously, it's the wrong one. So make sure that you use the right spark plug size socket and not use a regular socket. That's a top tip right there. Lastly, you'll hear people talking about cleaning spark plugs. And, you know, you can't hit these with sandpaper. We used to have a sandblasting machine. The problem is the sand would get in there and you couldn't really clean it out really well. And what can happen with spark plugs is they can get so fouled with fuel and oil that they don't fire. Maybe you don't want to go out and buy a new set of spark plugs and find out that the problem is not the spark plugs. Maybe you want to try to clean them. So let me show you how to do that. Okay, so I have the spark plug mounted upside down in a vise, and I have it tightened down by the tip end, not on the porcelain. And I'm just going to take a close look at this here. I don't want you focus. Focus, there you go. You see how it's kind of crusty? It's got some fuzz on it there from rolling around the tool cart. Anyway, we're going to clean it. And you might think that you use some type of spray or some type of spray solvent, some type of soaking thing, or a sandpaper or a scrub brush, and the answer is no, you don't. What we use to clean this is a plumber's torch. One of these blue propane torches is what I'm going to use, okay? And I'm going to light it. And I'm going to take the flame, and I'm going to put the flame near the tip. And you see that stuff blowing off there? That's actually deposits. Spark plugs reach a self-cleaning temperature, and sometimes we have to give that a little aid while they're out of the car to get them to that self-cleaning temperature. If the plug is really fouled, you'll see smoke coming off of it. I want to get that tip nice and hot. I'm not going to burn it. And if there was any fuel in here, I'd see it coming off as a bright orange flame. Not an orange one like we got here. See how hot that electrode is? That's okay. I got a little smoke blowing off there. That's all right. Go to the other side. Now what that's going to do, obviously it's very hot right now, and if I was a moron, I would pick it up and try to put it back in the car. So I'm going to let that cool off. You can see the smoke coming off of it there. A little bit of smoke. I don't know if you can see that. A little hard there with the lighting. But if I bring the camera back over, focus again, not on the junk on the bench, there you go. It's, believe it or not, it's actually cleaner. I burned off most of those deposits that were black, that was carbon. And what I'm left now is a plug that actually would work pretty well. All right, so let that cool off and we're good to go. Okay, so we are looking at a flat 4 Volkswagen engine. This is the distributor, this is the coil. You'll notice the coil is very far away from the distributor, and I have spark plug wires. You'll notice this one has some quality tape on it, which is not correct, running over to the side ports of the engine. This is a flat 4, so the spark plugs are on the side of the engine. This is the distributor. It's bolted down to the engine, and it has a cap on it. And I'm going to pop this cap off so we can see the rotor on the inside. It's held on with these clips, very fancy clips. You pry them off with a screwdriver. And that is the inside of the cap. I'm looking at the inside of my cap, and my inside of my cap is very nasty, and it needs to be changed. Let me pop this out here for a second. So that's the rotor. The rotor is going to spin around on the inside of the distributor. The rotor actually just pulls off like that. Underneath this piece right here is the Hall effect sensor with the shutters, and there's the sensor. So this rotor is, if it looks like it's burnt, it's because it's burnt. It's time for a new one of these guys. This has a lot of miles on it. All right, and then on the inside of the cap, what am I looking at here? So each one of those terminals is the terminals that the rotor hits, and you can see those burn marks with that oil there. Yeah, this guy's due for a change. Those are really pretty beat up. The important thing about this is there's a tab here on this side that lines up with a tab down there on the distributor. You can't just throw this thing back on. It sort of has to lock into place when you do this. And I'm gonna move that clip back on that side, put this clip back on here on this side, like that. The spark plug wires themselves, oops, I did not clip that well. There we go. Spark plug wires themselves, if you pull them off, they have a little area in there. We never want to pull it by the wire. We want to pull it by the boot. Let me show you a tool to do that. Okay, so these are spark plug pliers. You'll notice they have a circle at the end. They don't really close all the way. These are designed to grab onto the boot where you can twist and pull and lift safely, putting the force on the boot and not on the plug wire. If I put it on the plug wire, what that would do is it would pull right out. There's really not much holding these together. A lot of students and techs think you can yank on this wire, you'll rip it right out of the boot, and then it's trash. Let me show you what it looks like on the other. All right. Here, if we were looking down at the spark plug end, which I happen to be on this motorcycle, I wouldn't want to pull this wire again. I'd want to pull the boot. And again, I would use this on here. I'd grab the boot, and I'd just give this a quick little pull like that, and I can safely remove that without damaging the boot or the electrode, because if I did, I'd be ordering new parts from Japan. I'd have to get them shipped overnight. and then I wouldn't be able to go to the store.